Welcome back to Every Disney Movie Ever. My name is Jess and I'm watching Every Disney Movie Ever. Today I'm going to talk about The Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger is a 2013 theatrical release about lawman John Reed finding himself in the midst of a dubious scheme to hoard a bunch of silver, mine a bunch of silver, hoard it, and screw over the Native Americans while he's trying to seek revenge for the death of his brother. It is directed by Gore Verbinski, cinematography by Bojan Bazelli, editing by James Haygood and Craig Wood, music by Hans Zimmer, and is written by Justin Haythe, Ted Elliott, and Terry Rossio. The film is basically based on the famous American character, the Lone Ranger, which started as a radio show in 1933 that became very popular and was followed by a series of books, which was then followed by a television show that ran from 1949 to 1957. And then the character has obviously been, like, there was comics and just, like, a bunch of stuff. The general agreed upon origin is that John Reed, Dan Reed's younger brother, is with 5 other Rangers when they all get ambushed by a criminal named Butch Cavendish, and they all die except John Reed, who is very close to death. Tonto finds all of them and nurses John Reed back to life. And John swears justice for the wrongful deaths of all the Rangers and decides to wear a mask and keep up the facade that he passed away with the rest of the Rangers. And that's kind of the general agreed upon origin. With that being the general agreed upon origin, the movie's pretty faithful to that, actually. They changed the number of Rangers. It's supposed to be, in the movie, it's 7 graves instead of 6. I don't know why they did that. I don't know what the purpose was to raise the number. But they're pretty faithful to, it's Butch Cavendish and his gang that kill all the Rangers. But Butch Cavendish does kill Dan Reed. And then John is nursed back to life by Tonto. Not of Tonto's own free will, but because the spirit horse, it tells Tonto to, basically. And then John does want to seek justice against Butch Cavendish. For a long part of the movie, though, it's justice in a court of law. Like, he wants to, like, do the whole court of law thing versus just, like, his own personal justice for it. So, it's a little different, but the core of that origin is there. I was very excited to see that. The film stars Armie Hammer as John Reed / Lone Ranger, Johnny Depp as Tonto, William Fichtner as Butch Cavendish, Tom Wilkinson as Cole, Ruth Wilson as Rebecca Reed, and Helena Bonham Carter as Red Harrington. In 2002, Columbia Pictures announces that they're going to make a version of The Lone Ranger with classic media. Douglas Wick and Lucy Fisher want the tone to be similar to The Mask of Zorro. Columbia Pictures suggests that they turn Tonto into a female love interest. In 2005, Jonathan Mostow attaches to direct, but Columbia ends up putting it in turnaround. In 2007, the Weinstein Company was interested in purchasing the rights, but entertainment rights optioned it, and they approached Bruckheimer, who approached Disney, and Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio. In 2008, Elliott and Rossio were in final talks. They announced Johnny Depp would play Tonto, and they wanted to wait on a director and the lead actor until Pirates 4 was finished. In 2010, Gore Verbinski was attached to direct, mostly because he was the one that had suggested Johnny Depp be Tonto, and then they landed on Armie Hammer because they wanted a young Jimmy Stewart character. August of 2011, production had halted after budget concerns. This was a widely known thing. Like, this movie, most of the marketing for this movie didn't even happen because it was so widely known that the movie was costing a ton of money. Iger implored them to constrain the budget for the rest of filming. So Verbinski, Bruckheimer, Depp, and Hammer all deferred 20% of their salaries to help production costs. And the film was able to continue. They filmed in Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, and California. They were met with weather, wildfires, a chickenpox outbreak, and unfortunately, a crew member did die on set. Michael Andrew Bridger was the water safety expert, and he died working with a water tank. It's very sad. Several cast got trained on horseback, lassoing, gunslinging, and industrial light and magic were the ones that did the visuals. The film had a $225 to $250 million budget and made $260.5 million in the box office, which is so bad. Has a 31% Rotten Tomatoes consensus rating. Armie Hammer and Johnny Depp make for an appealing pair of leads, but they're not enough to make up for the Lone Ranger's bland script, bloated length, and blaring action overkill. The cast and the directors openly criticized the critical reception, claiming critics were reviewing the budget and not the film itself. It was nominated for Best Makeup and Visual Effects, and a sequel was floated before release, but ultimately, obviously, never followed through on because it did so bad. There was some controversy around Johnny Depp playing Tonto, obviously, so I'm going to read here. They did have an advisor from the Comanche Nation on set, referring to him for anything they needed about the Comanche. Many said casting Depp as a Native American was in poor taste. I do not disagree. Depp stated he believes he does have Native American in his heritage from a great-grandmother, and he was trying to consider this a personal attempt to right the wrongs of the past in reference to portrayals of Native Americans in media beforehand. And a linguist commented on Depp's attempt to speak the Comanche language, saying the words were there, the pronunciation was shaky, but adequate. So it seems like this was a little bit of a gray area where they were taking the steps to be respectful, having a Comanche advisor on set. The linguist saying he was speaking the language. Actually, it wasn't just like, nonsense that they used to do. Johnny Depp was aware and was trying to be respectful. So it's a little bit of a gray area in this sense, I suppose. I can't speak to it, obviously. So take all of this information and do with that what you will. It is still... I can't comment on it, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. And then, obviously wasn't a thing at the time, but has since become a problem, Armie Hammer. Oh no! Which makes me sad, because I'll go into it. But yikes. That's a big yikers. For those who don't know, I'm not going to dive into it fully, but if you haven't been around for the last few years and heard about Armie Hammer, you might want to take a little quick Google. Just take a little Google. Just do a little quick Google on that one. This is gorgeous to look at. It can't not be gorgeous to look at. Everyone, complains about the budget, but that budget got you what this movie looks like, and it is gorgeous. This movie is stunning. The amount of movement for even the most basic shot, the amount of coverage they have, the action sequences visually are so stunning. The color correction is, I totally get what they were going for, but there's a couple scenes that I'm like, this feels a little bit maybe too far into that zone, but at the same time, it totally fits the style of what they were going for. It's a unique vision. Gore Verbinski is out here. He did it for Pirates, he did it for this. It's so, perfectly in its world and set in its world, and you buy it visually wholeheartedly. I think it is stunning. I don't think you can say a bad thing about how this movie looks. People can complain about the story, or the length, or the budget, but you can't complain about how it looks. It is beautiful. Alright, it's too long. This is one of the biggest complaints that this movie gets, because it's 2.5 hours or 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's a long movie. Here's the thing. There have been multiple Pirates films that have been that long, that feel that long. I don't necessarily think this movie feels that long, but it is too long. And I do think some things could be lost. For instance, this movie is framed in a way that Tonto is telling the story to a kid in the 1920s at a carnival. I think that's completely unnecessary. The whole framed as a flashback moment, totally unnecessary. I don't think it serves any purpose for for Tonto to be telling this story to this little boy. I don't think it adds anything to the movie. I don't think it makes it important. I don't think it's affecting this child in any particular way, other than he's already a fan of the Lone Ranger. So I think losing all of that immediately shortens the runtime. Not by a lot, but it would shorten the runtime and take out this part that it needs to be, like, being told by someone. We can just watch the events take place. Which then would also remove a chunk of the beginning where, like, they go to the bank robbery, but then it cuts back, It would just start from the beginning of the actual story, right? And we lose a lot there, which I think is a huge deal. Then there are some action sequences that don't need to take as long as they take. Like, I would say the entire sequence of Tonto and John on the train for the first time, where they're connected via chains and handcuffs. That sequence is too long. Like, them crashing the train and everything. That sequence doesn't need to be that long. And then there's probably a couple other action sequences that don't need to take as long as they do. The one action sequence I will allow to be as long as it is the last one with the double trains and the dueling trains and the William Tell overture. It's like a 12-minute sequence, but it is perfection. I'll get there. But there are things that could have just come down a little bit. I know I've really leaned into some pirate movies for how long they are, and that's because I start to feel bored. I will say for this movie, I don't think there's a moment I start to feel bored, which is saying something. To be fair, though, I'm never bored in Curse of the Black Pearl, and I don't think I got bored in Dead Man's Chest. I think it was at World's End and on Stranger Tides I really started to get bored, especially at World's End. Dead Man's Chest, it might have had a scene here or there, like it felt like the plot was coming to an end. This, I never felt like the plot was, like, coming to a halt, which is saying something. I will say, when John gets Butch to Cole on the train, there's a little bit of this lull, but at the same time, because now you know some stuff, it's building even more tension then, so I feel like it's effective. Anyway, it's too long. Stuff could have been trimmed down, and we could have lost some stuff, and it maybe would have been that much snappier. The Lone Ranger theme that Hans Zimmer came up with, I think is slept on. I think because people hate this movie, they sleep on that theme that Hans Zimmer came up with. I think it's so simple and so good, recognizable, and, like, fits. It just fits. I really like the music in this film. And then also the 12-minute William Tell overture sequence at the end. Like, no one has genuinely used the William Tell overture, like, in its entirety or in that much length of time in forever. So for Hans Zimmer to be like, yeah, we're going there, we're doing it. And it was obviously a plan, because, like, they have stuff cued to it. Like, there's gunshots cued to it and stuff like that. And it's so effective. I think it was a great choice. It makes, for me, that scene so much more fun, because it's a recognizable song. And then it just, like, adds this, like, comedy to it. Like, oh my god, I can't believe they're actually using this song, and it's working, and it's making it more fun. I had a great time with that. I think Hans Zimmer naturally hit it out of the park. Alright, I already said it, but Tonto telling the story to the kid, I think is really unnecessary. I don't think we need to be doing it. I think there's a gap at the beginning that is so long you forget he's telling the story to the kid, and then it circles back, and then it circles back enough in the second half, I'd say. But again, I don't think it's necessary. I think the story stands on its own. It doesn't need to be framed as a flashback. Not that that's a great storytelling device. I do think that has a time and place. I just think it's unnecessary here. I think this is a downright fun Western. I might have the hottest take. I really like this movie. I liked it back when I saw it in theaters. I saw this in theaters with my brother and my mom. I remember having a blast, thinking it was so fun. And I remember thinking, like, I thought Westerns were boring, and this was just, like, a fun time. I was invested in the characters. I had a great time. Wahoo. You know what I mean? And then people say it's like Pirates of the Caribbean, but a Western. It's literally all the same people. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, Gore Verbinski, Jerry Bruckheimer. It's all the same people. They went, okay, we've done pirates, let's try Westerns. And for people to turn their nose up at this but love Pirates of the Caribbean is hilarious to me, because it's literally, like, kind of the exact same, you know, level of stuff. Like, they're complaining about the budget of this movie when, like, every Pirates movie except maybe the first one has a $200 million budget, so I don't understand why people were complaining about the budget of this one, but not the budget of all these other movies that cost $200 million to make. I digress on that one, I suppose. It's not perfect, by any means. I would never give this a 10. But it is fun, and it's exactly the same stuff that Pirates does. Like, I have watched this movie more than once. I have seen it multiple times since it was in theaters. I own it. I think it's a fun movie. I know it's long. I know it can be kind of ridiculous, but I like it. I feel right now I have to justify it, especially because it is more and more becoming a guilty pleasure given Armie Hammer's in it, which is such, like, that makes me so sad. I can't. Anyway, I think the story's interesting. I think discovering, Butch Cavendish and Cole are actually partners, and discovering the greed of the silver and how they're, killing Dan because he had a partnership with the Comanche, and I just think, I just think it's so interesting. And I like it. I think Rebecca and John is unnecessary, but they don't end up together because he's going to be the Lone Ranger. So I love that. I love that they're like, oh yeah, they're obviously in love and had a thing, but he's not choosing her. He's choosing to be the Lone Ranger, which I think is realistic and interesting. Anyway, so there are a lot of inferred parent deaths in this movie. We can infer that Dan and John's father passed away because Dan gives John his dad's ranger badge. We can also infer that Tonto's parents died because they say his entire village tribe was murdered, right? So, but none of them are said. The only parent death that happens on screen or said on screen is Dan dying. I know Danny isn't a main character, but I'm counting it. Dan's death is essential to the plot, so I'm counting that as a parent death. Story-wise, like I said, it's got problems. It's a little slow in places. And you got John and Rebecca and Dan and John, which could have used more. I feel like it would have been interesting, but it's good for what it is. You put Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End up against this, I feel like it's... My favorite part is the train sequence at the end. It always has been. I think it's so fun, and it's a great, teamwork, and I don't know, I just really like that sequence. My least favorite part... probably now the fact that Armie Hammer's in the movie because it feels very tainted and gross. Though I own it, so me watching it will never be giving him money, which is great. So that's fun. Before it being Armie Hammer, it was probably I'd say flashback. The flashback framing. It's so unnecessary. Every time I go back to Tonto telling it to that kid, I'm like, ugh, we don't need this. So, yeah, recommend. It feels weird to recommend because of the problems surrounding people in it. But it is fun. If you've seen it and you hated it back in 2013, I'd recommend maybe you try watching it again with new perspective and forget about the budget, because how many movies have had a $200+ million budget at this point? Who cares? Watch again. I will most likely be watching this again. It is a 100%. I sometimes just feel like watching it. I don't know. It's one of those movies, you're not the most proud that you like it. And I recognize yikers about some people. Specific things I want to mention. This is not on Disney Plus. Shocking it's not on Disney Plus. So good luck watching it if you can, if you don't already own it or something. Otherwise, I don't really have anything else super specific. I will say the health code violation joke probably made me laugh the most this watch through. I don't know why. But when he was I've noticed some particularly, specific health code violations, and he mentions a sinister jar of pickles on the bar, that made me laugh harder than it should have. That was so funny. I don't know why that made me laugh so hard. Because it was there's livestock in the premises and they serve food and they're, this, that, and the other. And then it's a sinister jar of pickles in the jar. Or on the bar. That's so funny. Anyway, that's everything I have. It's a well-made movie. It is. It's not perfect. It's too long. And now there's problematic actors in it. Yikes. Don't watch it if you don't want to support that. That's totally fine. I respect it. 100%. Bar none. But my final rating, Because of all the technicalities, my final rating is 8. What should we do? Horses? Silver bullets? Badges? Masks? Maybe silver, like a rock of silver. Let's do that. 8 rocks of silver out of 10. Our total movie count is. Our parent death toll is. Cry count is still the same. If you want to keep up with what movie I'm watching when, follow me on all socials to find out what movie I'm watching when. I put out videos every Monday and Friday and sometimes Wednesday. Join my Patreon. I got a tier starting at just $1. You get every video a week early, a coupon code for merch, and exclusive merch access. Tiers above that, you get daily trivia, monthly postcards, bonus content, etc. Buy merch. Merch great, merch grand. This is the OG with all the UDMEs in the back. Until next time, come on, subscribe, but I'm not in charge of your life. You are, so do, and don't be Cole and Butch Cavendish about it. Okay, I need water.